Hey again. I wanted to speak on something, ramble on a bit about another thing that pops into my head sometimes. And, you know, it's a subject that a lot of schizoids are probably familiar with, and that is internal worlds. Uh, that which we see in our mind's eye. And for some of us, lack of mind's eye. I know some of you have that other issue. Forgot what it's called. The one where you can't imagine what things look like in your head. That must make things especially doldrum some days. But if you've never experienced that, then maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. You've already adapted around it, so you have other means of constructing inner worlds or ideas, perhaps in the shape of words. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about my own inner world, and in the comments, I'd like to hear a little bit about yours, what it looks like. And I know schizoids are known for their worlds, right? And fantasy worlds or fantasy places or whatever that live inside of our minds, and that we like to occupy for extended visits at times. But I want to talk a little more nuance on that subject. Now, they vary. You can have everything from a schizoid that has a very consistent internal world that they go back to, that they dream of, that they like to lay in bed and look up at the ceiling and contemplate for, hours at a time, so on and so forth. That's how they like to spend some of their free time, whatever free time they do have, doing that. So that's one way, and I've met a few schizoids that have that. That have like a more specific sort of internal world that they go back to, with like rules and ideas and so on and so forth. But there's also the type that have internal worlds that are more inconsistent. So then you have small, almost like what's the word? It's not silhouettes. There's a word for when you have like a film made up of small films. Vignettes. There we go. They're like more like little vignettes of narrative, and those will play out individually based on whatever the mood or feeling of that person is. They might last a day or two, so it might be different sessions, or it might just be that individual fantasy that dissipates and never returns, but some other variation of it with similar themes and narratives might come back at a future date. So then you have that, right? And then you also have the kind in which nothing fantastical is really happening, whether consistent or inconsistent, but they actually apply the real world information around them, kind of transmortify it into something that would be more aesthetically pleasing or reasonable in their mind, and then fantasize about how that would function. So, they don't necessarily have any epic adventures inside their mind, or have superpowers, or have like these kind of elaborate world building kind of things. They might just be using a replica, essentially, of the real world inside their mind that they like to partake in which things actually go a little bit better, or go a little more as planned, or they're more understood, or they still exist within the parameters or limitations to a certain degree of what the actual world provides, or they wish it would provide. So then you have like that, right? So depending on the unique personality and perspective of the schizoid, those internal worlds can differ greatly, and also differ in style, length, and so on. In my case, since I can only speak from personal experience when it comes to this stuff, well, I mean, I could talk about other people's retellings of their experiences, but I'll stick to mine for now. Mine is more vignette based. It is more like individual little ideas or stories. Sometimes I like to introduce things that I've experienced or consumed media wise. So that's why I'm always really interested in reading stories, learning new stories, narrative types, learning types of characters, and so on. I love reading and watching and playing new stories and ideas, and because then I mix and mash them. Like inside my head, I'm essentially like a mixed DJ, a DJ of a media and things that I've witnessed, and along with things that I've created for myself, you know. And so I'll mix everything up inside my head, and then I'll create little scenarios and ideas. And I'll daydream about them, or I'll think about them, or I'll insert myself inside a world already built, and then think about what that is like, and what that is, and how that represents my physical reality, and what concepts and ideas I can integrate into my everyday life that would prove positive, that originally derived from notions or ideas that came from fiction or inside my mind. So things like that. That's another important thing to mention, is that some of us like to integrate those internal worlds into the external to make the external a little more tolerable, to alleviate the discomfort of the world we live in, as it's not really designed for people like ourselves. So that could take a bad shape sometimes. It could take the shape of delusion, which could be dangerous to that person, or lead to unfortunate occurrences, to say the least. Or it can also take some more positive shape, and that's what I kind of try to do for myself, is in which I get principles and concepts and ideas that are more thematic and a little less material, obviously, because I can't bring that stuff in, and apply them to my life in positive ways. And viewing other human beings in the real world as these kind of characters with different traits. And there's certain types of characters that I really like and love, even. And there's certain types of characters that I dislike and would rather not be around. And there's other types of characters that I dislike, but I know I should respect because they offer something that is important or valuable to life's experiences. So I apply some of those ideas to my everyday, and it allows me to navigate much of what seems sometimes very difficult to navigate. But not everyone does this sort of thing, and then some people do it to a, like I said, a detrimental point, to where maybe their sense of inner world starts bleeding into material reality. And because of that reason, like, they sometimes can't differentiate as well. I'm not saying, I'm not talking like necessarily like, fully schizotypal or having schizophrenic positive symptoms or something, but just being on that line where your external world starts being influenced in a less conscious way. That could lead to things like erotomania and sometimes misplaced thinking or misapprehensions about the external world that aren't in tune with, I guess they can't be reality checked very well. And some of this stuff doesn't have to be like completely like absurd things or things that are like really over the top or anything. I mean, that might be the case for some people when it does happen, but it could also be very simple things, very simple ideas and concepts that they start taking as for granted that might not be the case, and sometimes they can be optimistic, but they're generally pretty pessimistic. Yeah, so I would say all those varieties, all those different types, the way it bleeds or doesn't bleed, the way it can be consciously controlled and not, all those things create like an amalgam of various types of zoids that experience the world in very unconventional ways. Now I'm going to kind of just explain what some of the aspects of my own internal world look like. So, when I fantasize, usually I like challenges. I like things that are difficult. I like to imagine a world that is grimdark, essentially, but also has like small rays of hope that one can latch onto. It's definitely a mirror of my external world, whether I intend it to be or not. But I love this idea of a downtrodden, beaten character that doesn't give up, that keeps going, struggles and pushes and fights. And sometimes some internal worlds take the shape of something like a power fantasy. In my case, it's more like a struggle fantasy. And in some vignettes in my mind, I fail. In others, I succeed. Some are tragic. Some are hopeful. Obviously, they might differ depending on mood. I like to imagine myself as certain characters, or experiencing, not as them, but experiencing what they are experiencing, or relating to it. Or I like to think about myself having a conversation with one of these characters in some, metaphysical capacity. In a world in which they actually do exist, and what kind of conversation I would have with them, what kind of questions I would ask. And the idea of helping them on their quests by struggling with them is another fantasy that I have. I don't like things being too easy or too, just quick. I like long, drawn out struggles. I like difficulties because I think they lend themselves to lessons and experience and growth. So anytime, even if it's a medium I watch, like say it's a show I watch or an anime I watch or a book I read or whatever, piece of fiction, I usually gravitate toward horror. I like horror a lot. Sometimes the horror, the insurmountable or inescapable and terrifying sort of horror, draws me. It's interesting. But the type of horror that inspires me more is the kind in which the protagonist has a chance. They have a chance to succeed against the thing it is that they must confront, or that is chasing them. And the struggle of fighting and against seemingly impossible odds, and then coming out on top, even if with a missing limb or a missing eye or scars and such, but coming out on top is something I find interesting. Or dying in the process, but nonetheless succeeding in their goal of either protecting others or an idea or concept that they find extremely valuable or important enough to die for. Those sort of fantasies are nice. They're nice and they're tragic, but there's something really comforting about the idea of overcoming a great struggle. And of course, it might just be a reflection of my life, which has, for a large portion of it, been a great struggle in and itself. And Perhaps it is just a means of creating hope in succeeding or overcoming my own struggles via the motivation of having something to fight for, something to push and to struggle and drag through the mud and blood and water through, dredge the trenches and such. I think it has more to do with that than anything, in all honesty. But nonetheless, seeing these kind of characters in media, imagining these kinds of characters, imagining myself as these kinds of characters, it gives me the energy and the motivation I need to keep pushing forward. The tenacity, the anger, the sheer stubbornness to keep fighting and never resign myself to failure. To fight until I die. So that's definitely something that I really connect to. And I'm not entirely sure why. Some days I'm not sure why that in particular is what I connect to, but it is. And I'm curious to what kind of stuff, what kind of concepts or narratives or ideas you connect to. For some, I know it is resignation in itself, the ability to just close your eyes and stop fighting and float away. For some, it's, total power fantasy, to overcome, to have full control over their surroundings and to have power. So, because, in the real world, they feel so utterly powerless. I don't have any issues with any of these variations. I don't have any problems, or nor do I judge them. I just find them fascinating. And I wish to interact with them in some capacity, I guess. But in any case, I think one of the more key things that we should definitely discuss in the future is how do we get these internal worlds and these ideas and these things that are inside of us, these perceptions and fantasies and so on, and daydreaming that occurs, whether, like I said, whether complete fantasy or science-based or pragmatism-based or utilitarian or God knows what goes through some people's heads, whatever. Whatever these fantasies may be, how to get what positive does exist within them, what good and productive and practical can be surmised from reveling in these fantasies, and then applying it to something in your real life, so that your station in life, not status, but like your station as in like your at least personal comfort and ability to function can increase. And honestly, even if it's like, I know I've heard people tell me, schizoids tell me, it's like, why do any of that? I just want to be inside my head, or I just want to be doing things. I don't want to think, I just want to be thinking. I don't want to do anything. It's like, yeah, but how many things get in your how many things get in the way of thinking or spending time thinking, because so many other aspects of your life are not organized or functioning. So perhaps the best option is to more precisely or more effectively use your time in which you have to move and you have to do things, so that those things can be in better order and your life can be in better function, so that you can more comfortably dream when you wish to, without so much stress or worry or concerns or things constantly pulling you out of it at a moment's notice, because wooden beams and keep collapsing around you, and you're sitting there trying to meditate on this world that you've manufactured. In any case, okay, that's it. Thanks for listening. If you like the rambles, the streams, server, join the server, by the way. If you haven't, you're Schizoid. Go to the Zoid Void in Discord, look for Zoid Void. You'll find it. I have links in the About Me and everything else. And I also have links for stuff like the Patreon if you want to support it. I have this new thing called the Hermit Gotcha on the server. So what I'm attempting to do is basically let hermits or garden hermits or whatever just put stuff in there. I don't care what it is, if it's a video or a poem or an article in the news or anything. I don't give a shit. Just put it in there if you're a hermit. If you want me to react to it and see it, and you want just my, kind of Zoidy perspective on it, I'll gladly do it. I want to get a few things in there before I do a stream on it, and then people can watch it or whatever. Maybe they'll find it entertaining and a form of interaction with me that is still remote and distant enough to not make anyone uncomfortable, but still provide some sense of relatability and such. So, yeah. So you can do that too. Any one of those things. But to do that, you have to become the whole patron thing. So, and if you don't like that whole deal, PayPal or Bitcoin or whatever is fine. If for some reason, like, you're like, oh, I want to help this guy, but I don't like Patreon, you can just send a chunk and then tell me who you are. And, if the chunk is a chunk, then I'll just be like, well, I'll just give you Garden Hermit based on that. So, since Garden Hermit generally is like $5 a month anyway on Patreon, so I can do the math. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm like you guys. I just want to dream sometimes. But I also want to get those dreams and I want to apply them. That's the part that's difficult. All right, Zoid out.